Today I'd like to do a review and brief history of another one of my favourite watches of all time, which is the Rolex Submariner. This has to be one of the most iconic watches ever produced by any watch company in the world. I don't think there is anybody on the planet who hasn't heard of the name Rolex, and the Submariner is probably their most famous model, or at least one of their most famous models. Now, before we start taking a look at the actual Submariner, I'd just like to give a little bit of background into the company and how this watch came about. In 1903, the company known as Wilsdorf and Davis was founded in London. The trademark name Rolex was registered in 1908, and by 1915 it was adopted by the company, and that is the name that they were trading under. Rolex then moved to Switzerland in 1919 due to taxes mainly, and that's where they have stayed ever since. In 1926, Rolex patented the world's first waterproof case, which is known as the Oyster, and that's what it's still known as today. So what better company, in my opinion, to make a diving watch? So now we'll kind of fast forward a bit to 1954. This is when Rolex unveiled the Submariner model to the world at the Basel Watch Fair. This was perfect timing. It was a year after the release of the Blancpain 50 Fathoms, and it was also the same year that scuba diving was introduced. So Rolex really did get this spot on. I think it was coincidence regarding the scuba thing, but Rolex got it right, and more importantly, the watch was right. Now, these first Submariners had the case references 6204 and 6205. There's often speculation as to which one actually came first, but in my opinion it's pretty irrelevant as they're virtually identical. Neither of these models have the cathedral or Mercedes hands that we're used to seeing nowadays, but instead had straight pencil style hands. Interestingly, very few of these original Submariners actually had the name Submariner printed on the dial. This was due to a copyright issue that was going on at the time. Some of the early ones that do have the Submariner logo would either have that printed below the centre pinion or just above it and to the left. Again, irrespective of what is or isn't printed on the dial, these watches are Submariners and were listed as such in all of the Rolex product literature. I should also point out that in 1954 Rolex also produced a very small quantity of case reference 6200 Submariners. These were actually the first Submariners to use the Mercedes hands, the hands that we still see today. And they also featured an oversized winding crown compared to the 6204 and 6205 models. All three of these original Submariner models used the A296 movement, and although the Rolex Submariner wasn't the first diving watch, it was actually the first diving watch that could reach a depth of 100 meters, and in my opinion it certainly did set the standard for this genre of watches. In just under 2 years' time from the original release of the Submariner followed the model reference 6538. This was now water resistant to 200 meters or 660 foot. Personally, I find this very impressive. To be able to go from 100 meters to 200 meters in such a short amount of time is very impressive. They basically doubled the water resistant capability of the watch. This watch is considered the first Submariner to really use the Mercedes hands and the oversized triplock crown, which have been in use ever since. This is basically because the 6200 model that I mentioned, it was made in such small quantities that they virtually don't exist. I should point out they did actually make a 6536 model as well, which does look exactly the same as a 6538, but for some reason it only had a water rating of the originals. It was only water resistant to 100 meters. Both of these watches shared the same movement, which was the new caliber 1030, but like I said, for some reason they had two different depth ratings. These lower depth rating watches are now highly sought after and very collectible. As for production years for both of these watches, the reference 6538 was produced between 1954 and 1959, and the 6536 was produced from 1955 to 1959. Like I said, they both had exactly the same movement. It was just a difference in depth rating. Both of these models are known as the so-called James Bond Submariners, so are very, very famous watches. One final thing I'd like to add regarding this era of watches is that the 6538 reference model, the last 3 years of production, it actually had officially certified chronometer on its dial, and there were quite a few sources saying that they are actually the first Submariner to display that on the dial. They were actually COSC certified, the 1030 movement. For some reason, the 6538 watch, although it had exactly the same movement, it didn't have this printed on the dial. Between 1957 and 1958, Rolex looked to standardise their reference numbers of the Submariner, and they wanted a 55 prefix. So what was once the 6536 became the 5508. Now, it was exactly the same watch. The only difference was in the new reference number. The 55 prefix models lasted through until 1990, when these 55 prefix models were last produced. Up until 1957 or 58, the Submariners had quite a lot of different variations. To begin with, they had gilt printing on the dial, which basically means that the text was in gold, but some of them had various patterns on the dial. Today we're used to just seeing the plain black, but back in those days of the year, there were various patterns. There were differences in hour markers. There were differences in bezels. There were quite a lot of differences. With the introduction of the 55 series, Rolex standardized all these previous inconsistencies. All of the cases now had integral crown guards. All the dials had white coloured printing. The bezels had 1 minute graduations from the 1 minute to 15 minute marker, and then 5 minute graduations from 20 minutes through to 55, just as we see today. And also the bezel triangles were all silver now. This takes us up to 1959, where Rolex introduced the reference 5512 Submariner. This watch was produced from 1959 right the way through until 1978, and during that time it had 4 different calibers. These calibers were the 1520, 1530, 1560 and 1570. I'm not entirely sure whether the reference 5512 sub had COSC certification through its entire product lifespan, but it certainly did have the chronometer certification for many years through until the end of its production. The reference 5513 was then introduced in 1962. This replaced the reference 5508. The 5513 was produced from 1962 right through until June of 1990. It's actually one of the longest continually produced references in Rolex history. It really did have a very, very long run. Now, the reference 5513 model used calibers 1520 and 1530. Interestingly, the caliber 1530 movement was used in both the 5513 but also in the 5512 models for a while. The 5512 carried the COSC certification, the chronometer certification, while the 5513 for some reason, while using the exact same movement, didn't. The 5513 for this reason is one of the most collectible Submariners out there. I should point out that all of the models that I've been talking about up until now are none of the date complication models. These are all non-date models, but I will now be starting to talk more about the date models that were introduced as well, as they are just as important in the history of the model as the no dates. So in 1965, Rolex introduced their new caliber, the 565 caliber, which had chronometer certification and also a date display. And then in 1971, they modified it to include a hacking mechanism. Basically, the hacking mechanism is so when you pull the crown out to set the time, the second hand stops ticking. Now, this new caliber also led to a complete new model series. This series is known as the 168 series. The reference 1680 was introduced somewhere between 1965 and 1966. I don't know exactly when it was introduced, but it was between those years, and it had the chronometer status and also the date display. This was also the first Submariner to have a date magnifier built into it, which we call the Cyclops. The 1680 also marked a transition in the Submariner. Every watch up until then had been purely a tool watch. It was used mainly by people who went diving, but the 1680 models, they introduced gold and two-tone versions, so it started to transition from a tool watch into a proper luxury sports watch. It was no longer being aimed purely at people interested in diving. Now, there is one model of the 1680 that I really do have to mention. It was only produced for a couple of years, but the word Submariner on the dial was actually printed in red. These are actually known as the red Submariners. You may well have heard of those before. These are highly collectible models. If you ever come across one of these Submariners with the red printing, please get it checked out by somebody who really does know about Rolexes to ensure it is genuine, as I have heard in the past of people, buying dials from dubious sources and replacing them. But if you get your hands on the real deal, it's a wonderful watch to own, and it's only going to go up in value over time. Somewhere between 1977 and 1978, Rolex introduced the 16800 reference Submariner. This introduced the caliber 3135 movement, which had a quick set date, and the watch had sapphire crystal. Now, any watch prior to this is known as a plastic sub. Again, another term you may have heard of. This is basically because all of the Submariners prior to this used a kind of acrylic for the glass. Now Rolex transitioned over to using sapphire crystal. Another point that I should make is that the 16800 was now rated from 200 meters to 300 meters, or 660 feet to 1,000 feet. Sometime around 1985 or 86, white gold surrounds were also added to the luminous hour markers. Towards the end of the production run of these models, for about 9 months, Rolex produced a special reference 168000, in which the quality of the stainless steel was upgraded from 316 grade to 904. Also in that year, the reference 14060 was introduced, running alongside the new 16610 with a new caliber 3000. This watch was actually produced for 10 years, from 1989 right through until 1999. It also introduced the white gold surrounds to the hour markers, sapphire crystal, and the new fast beat movement. The difference between the caliber 3000 as used in the non-date model versus the 3135 as used in the date model is the lack of date complication, obviously, but also the absence of COSC certification. In 2003, Rolex celebrated the Submariner's 50th anniversary, and to do this they launched a new Submariner date anniversary edition. The reference was 16610LV. It had a green bezel insert and also a maxi dial, and was produced until 2010, with the final models having the new random serial numbers. In 2008, a new case from the GMT2 was introduced for the Submariner date, which had basically heavier lugs and crown guards. It had a Kerachrome bezel and an updated clasp featuring a quick adjust function. The 14060M didn't have these modifications. Now, a new Submariner date model 116613 based on the super case used in the GM2, was presented at the 2008 Basel show. The first Submariner date models offered were a yellow gold with blue face and bezel, and a new white gold with blue face and bezel. The stainless steel case model was presented at the 2010 Basel show, and its reference is 116610. At the 2012 Basel World Watch Show, an updated Submariner reference 114060 was introduced. It replaced a 14060M with a newer maxi case with chromolite hour markers, ceramic bezel, a blue parachrome hairspring and bracelet with glide lock extension system. Finally, I'd just like to give my own sort of personal view and thoughts on the Submariner. It's a watch that I really do respect. I love the Rolex brand. I love the Submariner. It is one of my all-time favourite watches. It's right up there with the Seamaster 300. In fact, I own a Rolex Submariner. I've got a 2006 16610. Model, which I love. It was actually the first real luxury watch that I purchased. I love the fact that Rolex haven't changed the model dramatically. The changes were very slight. You can put a 1954 Rolex Submariner next to a brand new one, and you can see that those watches related. It's like cars. It's like a Porsche 911. You can put an original one next to, you know, the very latest one, and you can see that they're related, and that's something I really like about the Submariner. I think it was a case of, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and Rolex has kept true to that. And I really do take my hat off to them for doing that. Unlike say Omega, who've kind of gone full circle. They've gone from the Seamaster 300, they've gone through various different styles, and you know, and through the 70s and 80s, and now they're starting to make their newer watches look like the original Seamasters. Rolex never went down that road. They just kept true to the design and style of the original Submariner, and it worked. So this concludes my review and brief history of the Rolex Submariner. As always, I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please click the like button, and if you haven't already subscribed, please do subscribe to the channel, because there'll be more videos to come. I hope that this video hasn't kind of been too long. It's been quite a difficult video to make, in honesty, because there are so many Rolex Submariner models and stories that I just haven't been able to include. Otherwise this video, you know, it'd be literally hours long. It'd be a full-on documentary. But I hope I've covered sort of the main ones out there. If there's any that I haven't and you feel that should have a mention, please add it into the comments to let other people know about them. And if you want to give me any feedback regarding the video, then please do. I'll just add a montage of old Submariner adverts at the end of this video, which again I hope you will enjoy looking at, and also a full list of model numbers and you know, the production dates at the very end of the video, if you want to use those for reference. Thank you for watching.